Hey everybody, Tekking101 and Barry the Brick here to start off a brand new day. And what a marvelous day it is. The birds are singing. Actually, they are not, because it is very, very cold outside, and if the birds were smart, they all flew south months ago. But if there were birds outside, they would be singing right now, right? But more importantly, a new One Piece statue has been erected in Kumamoto, Japan. This time we have Zoro's epic statue, with Enma included. I don't even know how the hell that thing fell off that time. Okay. Anyway, so this is, of course, continuing with the Kumamoto project. Oda pumped a lot of money into that region after it was ravaged by a tsunami a few years ago. That's his hometown. I am really planning on doing just an entire video on that entire project, and so that'll be further on. But because the Zoro statue was placed there, I decided to start thinking about Zoro-themed videos, and I arrived at this conclusion, all right? I made a video about the Straw Hats' parents, going through each of the Straw Hats and whether or not their parents would be revealed in the story. I made that back in 2021, but back last year already, right? But I wanted to talk about this a little bit more with Zoro, just to kind of like get a gauge on how the fandom feels about this, because it was revealed recently in an SBS, because everybody thought that Ushimaru Shimosuke, the samurai that was in charge of the Ringo region alongside Onimaru the fox, one of the samurai that was in the cave with Yamato, we were all thinking that Ushimaru was definitively Roronoa Zoro's father, right? Because it seemed like it worked out. And I even went through the timelines and everything, and I'm like, oh yeah, this would work out perfectly. Ushimaru and, his wife could have had Zoro, and then Zoro could have been shipped off to Shimosuke Village somewhere in the east, and that makes sense because, Ushimaru Shimosuke was probably related in some way to Kozaburo Shimosuke, probably like, maybe not necessarily his son or anything. In fact, we know that's probably not the case, but could have been like, a relative in some other capacity, right? So, that could have happened, and then Zoro got sent to Shimosuke, and then he grew up there, and then Ushimaru stayed on Wano, and he was eventually executed by Kaido, right? But then Oda shocked a lot of people in the SBS by coming out directly and saying, no, Ushimaru Shimosuke is not Zoro's father, okay? And that is something a little bit unusual for Oda to just come out and just say that, like, that is not the case, okay? Because a lot of times in the story, Oda will often keep things, like, open-ended, and a lot of times when people ask, like, direct questions like that in the SBS, like, hey, is this character related to this character, or is this character part of this pirate crew, or what about this character's past? Oda, if he answers the question at all, which a lot of times he will probably just ignore it, but a lot, like, I don't mean ignore in a bad way, I mean, like, okay, imagine all of the SBS questions Oda receives. Imagine how many questions are like, who's Luffy's mom? What is the One Piece? What's the relationship between Blackbeard and Rocks? Those questions Oda probably gets boatloads of every single day, and he doesn't address them because that's stuff that's going to be later on in the story. But whenever Oda does address something like that in an SBS, like, for example, here's something. When Shaki revealed that she used to be a pirate 40 years ago and Garp used to chase her around. And then it was revealed that Rox's pirate crew existed around 40 years ago. Older than that. Was like eliminated about 40 years ago, 38 years ago at God Valley. People asked Oda, like, hey, so what's the deal with Shaki? Was Shaki part of Rox's crew? And Oda was just kind of like, oh, well, I mean, like, I don't know, maybe. So Oda does that kind of stuff, right? Whenever he does choose to answer a question like that, he'll usually be like, I don't know, maybe they were. I don't know. Next question, please. So it's a little unusual for Oda just to come out directly and just say, oh, you think Ushimaru Shimosuke is Zoro's dad? No, he's not. There you go, right? Which means that Oda probably has a different plan altogether for Zoro, but that also proves that because he was so direct about it, it's probably not that big of a deal in the story. And this follows what Oda said a few years ago when he was talking about the whole thing with Kozaburo in the past involving Zoro and Kuina and Koshiro. He was basically like, it's not that big of a deal in the story. I'm going to address it during Wano, but it's more of like a background thing, okay? So let me just ask you a simple question as the fans of One Piece. Would you like to know the story of Zoro's parents? parents? And more specifically, as a caveat to that question, would you want Zoro's parents to be like really badass? Would you want them to be like great warriors of Wano, like samurai or something that were like direct descendants of Ryuma or something like that? Like, because that's honestly what I thought for a long time. After all, Ryuma and Zoro definitely share a similar appearance. But then again, I had to stop and step back a bit and realize, well, Roger in his younger years looked a lot like Luffy does now. And Roger and Luffy are not related, like, closely. It's not like Luffy is Roger's son or anything like that, and yet they looked remarkably similar. Now, that might actually have something to do with the Will of D, from, like, way, way back in the Void Century, there, that clan of D. That might have had, like, Roger and Luffy's ancestors, but then the family branched off over the course of centuries. That could also explain why, even though Luffy and Ace are not blood-related, they still look like they could be blood related. I mean, Luffy and Ace look pretty damn similar to each other. That might be because, like, if you go back far enough, like, their great grandfather might have been Joy Boy, right? It might have been something like that, why they look so similar. And something similar could be with Zoro and Ryuma, where I definitely feel there has to be some kind of familial connection there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Zoro being, Ryuma's great grandson or something like that, like, directly, okay? And then again, the whole idea of One Piece a lot of times is the inherited will. It's not so much about, like, who your father is or who your grandfather is, your direct family relationship. It's about the will you carry on. That's another reason why Blackbeard might not actually be Rocksteady Zebek's, like, legitimate son. It might be, like, a situation where Blackbeard might have just heard about Rocks and he studied the same thing that Rocks studied about Rocks trying to become the master of everything, like the king of the world and all that stuff. And Blackbeard was interested in that research, and then that's why he is what he is today, okay, following in Rox's footsteps the same way Luffy is following in Roger's footsteps and Shanks' footsteps, right? Okay, so honestly, at this point in the story, considering Oda was so quick to say Ushimaru is not Zoro's father, I'm going to say that, yeah, Zoro's parents are probably from Wano, or at least descended from Wano. But I think originally I said they might have been samurai. Now I'm doubting even that. Like, I'm honestly at the point here where I'm like, Zoro's parents were probably maybe just peasants. Maybe just regular peasants living in Wano. They might have left at some point and went to Shimosuke Village. Or perhaps it was like Zoro's grandparents that left Wano with Kozaburo and they ended up in Shimosuke Village. And they weren't samurai. They weren't nobility. They weren't related to daimyos or anything. Or maybe in some tangential way, just because Ryuma is their shared ancestor, like, because Ryuma lived 400 years ago, okay? So you have the main family of the Shimosuke family that continued on, that was, like, the direct descendants of Ryuma. Like, Ushimaru was probably, like, the great whatever grandson of Ryuma. That kind of makes sense. I can buy that. But then Ryuma, I mean, he might have had a lot of kids. I mean, he was the sword god back in the day, so that implies, both that he was the god of the sword and then also the god of the sword, right? Okay, so he might have had a lot of kids, and, one of those kids might have ended up not becoming part of the main family, then, like, a branch family, and then a branch family to the branch family, and it might have ended with the, the Roronoa line, the one that Zoro's part of, right? Where they weren't samurai, they weren't anything special, they were just regular peasants or whatever. And then maybe they decided to leave Wano with Kozaburo, and they went to, the East Blue, and then they had children, and then those children might have met other people from the East Blue, just like how Kozaburo's wife was someone from the East. Kozaburo's wife was not somebody from Wano. He met somebody in, the East Blue, and then that's how they had Koshiro, and then Koshiro met somebody from the East as well, and then they had Kuina. So it could have been just something like that. And so Zoro's parents, probably were born in the East, and they just lived in the village, and maybe they practiced swordsmanship a little bit, but it wasn't anything substantial. And it might have been another situation where they might have died when Zoro was young. Not to rehash plot points like with what happened with Usopp's mom, but it could have been a situation like that where perhaps Zoro's parents died of a disease when they were young. Maybe at some point there was a disease or a plague that, like, swept through Shimosuke Village. And this happened when Zoro might have been, like, a baby or a small child, and so he doesn't remember it. But maybe there was a situation where there was a disease in Shimosuke Shimosuke village, and his parents caught it, and then they both died, right? At the end of the day, I don't think Oda's really going to go that in-depth into Zoro's parents, because for number one, we already had that with Sanji in the previous arc. We had the whole thing with Sanji's dad being somebody very relevant. I don't know how much relevance you want to give to Judge, but, you know, he is relevant. He is, okay? I think Judge is going to pop back up in the story. There's the cover page serial right now that's all about the Germa, and it's going to tie back into stuff in the past, you know, involving the Germa Double Six and when they took over the North Blue, right? So I can understand why Oda would not want to, in the next arc, be like, okay, now we found out the whole history involving Sanji's parents, now we find out the whole mystery involving Zoro's parents, because I said this in the Straw Hat parent video, not every single parent of the Straw Hats has to be super powerful or super relevant or have, like, you know, information involving the Void Century or anything like that, right? Because I think that's antithetical to the message that Oda is trying to spin here, okay? It's not always about your family connections. It's like, sort of like, look at Ace, for example. Like, Ace was Roger's son, the king of the pirates' son, and he hated his father, and he decided, yes, Ace became a pirate as well, but it wasn't to follow in Roger's footsteps. It was to make his own name. It was to cement himself as a great pirate separate from Roger, okay? So I think a message that Oda's trying to spin here is that, like, yeah, you know, blood is not so much thicker than water, you know, that old saying. It's the idea that, like, you can make your own story, your own legacy, right? And when there is maybe connections that you have with other people, they might not necessarily be familial connections, right? And that kind of does go back on the whole thing I said earlier in this video with, like, maybe Ace and Luffy and Roger and maybe Shanks or whatever do kind of share a familial connection, but it is so far back. It is so far back in, like, 800-900 years into the Void Century that it's not like they know about it. It's not like it's relevant anymore. You know, and even look at the relationship that Luffy has with Dragon. That's a joke. It doesn't exist, because Luffy and Dragon don't really have a relationship because they've never really encountered each other. Luffy did not even know what his father looked like up until, like, the Totland arc, when he looked at his picture in the newspaper. That was the first time Luffy got to see his father's face. And Luffy does not care about Dragon, right? He cares about Garp, you know, he cares about Garp because that's his grandfather, but still, you know, there's things that are more important than family. For example, when he went to go save Ace and he punched Garp in the face. You know, that's how it goes. Ace, face. That's how it works, right? So yeah, I don't think that's going to be the situation with Zoro's parents in any capacity. Actually, how about this? What if Zoro's parents are still alive? It's just that they were so, like, normal and, like, not relevant in any major way. We never saw them before, right? Like, what if Zoro's parents are still living in Shimosuke village, and when Zoro was a little kid, he just decided that he wanted to become the greatest swordsman in the world, so he ran out and he just started training like crazy, and he was rarely ever home, you know? Like, maybe every once in a while he would come back home and his mom would make him some dinner or whatever, but for the most part, when he was a kid, Zoro spent pretty much every waking hour either training at the dojo with Koshiro, or training with Kuina, or training by the cliff with Kozaburo. Like, he was training constantly. That's how he got so strong by the time he finally left Shimosuke village to become a bounty hunter, right? So it's like, yeah, his parents might have still been there. It's just we never met them because they were just average. They were normal. They were boring. You know, it's not like Zoro's dad was some kind of revered samurai, like, son, you are the greatest, you are the son of the greatest samurai in Wano, so therefore I shall give you my sword. No, his dad was probably just like, I don't know, the Wano equivalent of a salaryman or something. Maybe he ran... Okay, I'm using bakers a little bit too much here. Maybe he was a banker. Yeah, that's it. Zoro's dad was a banker in Shimosuke village, okay? Little bit of an anachronism there because, like, you're talking about some feudal Japan village and, like, a modern bank that's just there, you know, they're FDIC and everything like that, you know, they have ATM machines. It's just like, this doesn't really make any sense, but hey, you gotta make an honest living somehow, right? Okay. It could have been Zoro's dad, right? And his mom was just, you know, a nice lady, I'm sure, lovely, you know, okay, but, like, nothing really that crazy with her, you know, nothing nuts going on, like, oh, she's actually a member of the Amasuki clan this entire time. I mean, not like that, right? I mean, if you trace the family line back enough, you will probably get to the sword guard Ryuma, because maybe that was just, you know, Ryuma's thing. Like, he just had a lot of kids. He had like 42 kids. He was just a machine. And then so I was like, okay, everybody in Wano, if you trace them back far enough, you'll probably be related to Ryuma. That could have been a thing as well. I would rather maybe another Straw Hat's parents be revealed revealed as, like, important to the story rather than Zoro. Okay, not every single one of them has to be important. So, like, Nami's parents do not have to be important to this story. Bellamere is Nami's mom. Okay, that's how it is, right? You know, Nami does have biological parents. They're probably dead. And even if they're not dead, I don't think they're going to be relevant in any particular way. But Frankie's parents, on the other hand, I would actually like them to be relevant, at least in a little way. Maybe not necessarily relevant to the point where, like, because Frankie's parents were pirates, so I'm not saying, like, they were the greatest pirates ever, but how about this? What if Frankie's mom and dad were, like, you know, killed by Roger or something back in the day? Because they dumped Frankie off Water 7 when he was just a little kid. He's originally from the South Blue. So that would have been when Roger was still active and maybe Shiki was still around and stuff. What if it was a situation where Frankie's parents got a little bit ahead of themselves and they got killed by Roger or Shiki or Whitebeard or Big Mom back in the day? And that wouldn't be super relevant to the plot, but if we found out about that later, because Frankie was not present in Totland, maybe if, you know, and then all that, the only interaction that Frankie and Big Mom had was when Frankie drove a motorcycle over her face. But maybe if, you know, she hears his real name, like Cutty Flam. Ah, yes, the Flams. They were truly, you know, pathetic pirates that I wiped out years ago. You know, and then Frankie's like, oh, you killed my mom and dad. That's not really super. Oh, actually, maybe it is. I didn't really care about them too much. So, I mean, like, Oda dropped that piece of information way back in the day when the Straw Hats first arrived at the Red Line, so maybe they'll be relevant. But I would rather, like, other Straw Hats' parents be relevant to the story rather than Zoro's at this point, okay? Like, you know, like, if Oda really wanted Zoro's parents to do something in this story or be part of a flashback in some substantial way, he would have already have established that probably long before Wano, okay? And, like, dropping hints, the kind of the same way he did with Sanji. Like, Sanji dropped some hints that, yeah, he was from the North Blue, and then there was during Alabasta when his alias was Mr. Prince. See, that's how Oda does this type of shit, right? And with Zoro, other than the resemblance to Ryuma he has, and a few things that were dropped in this arc, like, oh, Ryuma was a one-eyed swordsman, and Zoro is a one-eyed swordsman. You know, other than that's been pretty much just very direct kind of references they've been dropping in this arc. We really haven't had anything with that throughout the rest of the story, like to like really talk about Zoro's lineage in a major way. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to gauge what you guys feel about that situation. Probably not going to make any other videos about this, unless it is revealed at some point, like Oda was just screwing with us the whole time. It's like, actually, Ushimaru is Zoro's uncle the whole time! Wahaha! It turns out Zoro's parents are nobles. They were great samurai that died in the war, and they shipped Zoro off to Shimosuke Village to survive. My God, you know, if Oda actually did end up doing that, I'd be like, I would be mad at him for like maybe 10 seconds. I'd be like, Oda, you lied to us. But then I'd be like, well, no, he really didn't. Alright, screw it. Zoro's parents were the two biggest badass samurai that ever lived in Wano. They sliced up all of Kaido's minions. Kaido got into a battle with Zoro's dad that lasted 15 days. But finally he got brought down by the Dragon Duck Tyrant. And then Zoro, while he's going to Ryuma's grave to, you know, say goodbye to Shusui one final time, he sees his dad's grave right next to Ryuma's. And then a ghost Jedi spirit of his father and Ryuma arrive, and they walk over to Zoro. Ushimaru's spirit is there as well. And they all just kind of like bump fists at the same time, and they all hold up their swords from the afterlife. And Zoro's like, I shall become the greatest swordsman in the world. And all the other samurai are like, yes, you are. Because you are the prophecy child, Zoro. You're destined for greatness. You have the powers of Ryuma, Ushimaru, and your father all within you. Now conquer the seas, son. Conquer the seas! Maybe it could be that too. I don't know. But all I do know is it's time for some elephant facts. Okay, this elephant fact, this one's going to be rated like maybe PG-13, maybe even higher than that, because we're going to be talking about the mating rituals of elephants. Yeah, it's actually very fascinating, a little strange. Okay, so I mentioned this before. Whereas when it comes to a family structure, it's pretty much just, female elephants and their calves that kind of stay in a group. And they're very, altruistic. They care about each other in the group, even if they're not blood related, okay? But then what happens to the males? Well, when a male elephant gets old enough, a bull elephant just kind of goes off on his own and will either live a solitary life or a life living in a group with other males, okay? But it's kind of, they can be off on their own. That's kind of normal as well, right? So if you ever go on a trip to Africa and you happen to see an elephant just walking by itself, it's most likely a bull, or it's, I guess, another elephant that got separated from its herd. But at any rate, however, they go into this state called moose. I don't know how to pronounce it, but this is how you spell it, okay? And this is like the drive that they have, so to speak, to mate. And this starts when they're maybe around like teenage age, but it keeps increasing like in terms of intensity. So by the time the male elephants are in like their 20s, it's like at its peak, okay? And it continues on through their older age. Some older elephants might have it at a different time of year. Like during the wet season in Africa, older elephants tend to go into this state of must, and then younger elephants might go into it during the dry season. It depends with that. But all male elephants go into it at a certain point when they get old enough, okay? And telltale signs of in this state of must is they begin to, like, they're not really crying, but, like, basically their eyes begin to water. So it just looks like these male elephants are just crying. It also might cause them to urinate just sporadically for no reason. So now I want you to picture you're in Africa, like, oh, look at that elephant over there. That's the African bush elephant all by itself. Oh, it's so elegant. And it gets close enough and it just looks like it's crying, and then just piss is just spraying everywhere. It'd be like, okay, no, let's get away from this thing, right? Okay. But that's what happens. That's what occurs. That's a telltale sign of it. They have increased aggression, as is the case with a lot of males in species like this. Like, for example, I know male deer can get, like, bucks. They can get very agitated in this state, and that's when, like, male deer will, like, lock antlers, so to speak, and, like, fight in the woods and stuff like that, okay? So that's when in this state they're very agitated. Although serious, like, fights to the death between male bull elephants doesn't seem to happen super often. It's usually like an intimidation thing, because in elephant culture, it's really broken down by, like, age. Okay, so like an older bull elephant, if it encounters a younger bull elephant, typically the younger bull will be, like, back down first, because there's, like, an older elephant here. And by the way, I never talked about it, but elephant ages, African bush elephants and the forest elephants can live from 60 to 70 years in the wild, and Asian elephants live to about maybe 50 years old, okay? But anyway, yeah, so there's typically, like, a hierarchy thing. So a lot of times when bull elephants are in a group together and they enter this state of must or moose, whatever, when they're in this state and they're getting, like, agitated or, like, aggravated, they might, like, stomp, they might, like, create some kind of intimidating display. But it's like the older elephants will usually win out. Sometimes there are serious fights where they actually brawl and, like, stab each other with, like, their tusks or whatever and try to bring them down, but that doesn't usually happen, okay? And lastly, there is a story here that I wanted to say that involved some younger bull elephants that were taken onto a reservation, I believe, and they were, like, separated from the older members of their group, okay? So it was just a bunch of young bull elephants that were in this state. And there were also rhinos on this reservation, on this, like, preserve, okay? And the young bull elephants completely, like, killed these rhinos, like, stomped the shit out of them, okay, when they were in this aggravated state. However, when they introduced older bull elephants into this preserve, all of a sudden, the younger elephants were cool around the rhinos. So that implies that, like, when these younger elephants are going into this state of must, they kind of require older elephants to kind of, like, show them the way or guide them or, like, calm them down. And just like, it's okay, son, you're going through some changes right now, but you'll be okay. That's what it means to be an elephant, right? And it seems like they're, like, just way calmer in this state when they're around older elephants. They're not, like, stomping the shit and killing rhinos, okay? So, yeah, that's a story, but that's the story about elephants mating. And then the rest of it, you can kind of just put two and two together on that one. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Bye. Nothing left. Just me here. I'm running out of apples, I swear to God. I ate one yesterday, not on camera, so I apologize for that. So I only have 2 left. Actually, I guess I have 1 left after this. They really are good apples. I've gotten quite positive response from this. You know, there was like one person that was like, don't eat on, camera on your microphone because it's very disturbing, but yeah. Is this going to be the new thing? Is this going to be the new thing? Because I'll be honest with you. I wasn't planning on Barry to become a staple on the channel. You know what I mean? He's a brick. I don't know if you know that, but he's a brick, right? Barry was literally supposed to be a one-off joke that just went on for literally almost like 2.5 years at this point, right? I'm not eating an apple in every single video. I'm not doing it. I mean, they're okay, but if I have to eat an apple in every single video from here on out, I'm not going to be a happy camper. They're all right, though. Yeah. This is one of those videos where I felt like I've kind of already discussed a lot of stuff with it before, but this is kind of a busy day to me coming up, so I was like, all right, I need to do a video that's kind of quick that I can just do, and so that's where this, the backstory of this one came from. Still, it raises an interesting question about Zoro's parents and all that stuff. I do want to do a video on the Kumamoto project, though. It's just that I didn't really have time to sit down, and I'd have to read about everything and do some like research and stuff. I know bits and pieces, but not the whole story. And I just didn't have time for that today. Honestly, I don't even have time to be doing this right now. Like, I could be editing this video because I have to get moving. But here I am eating an apple. We all need to just stop and just eat an apple every once in a while, you know? Life's going fast, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of shit in the world happening. We all need time just to sit down and just eat apples. Do that. Do that. Today, if you don't have any apples at home, go to the store after school or after work or whatever you're doing today. If you're just out and about, stop at a store at some point. Stop at a grocery store or a fruit stand. If you have a fruit stand where you live. I don't really have a fruit stand where I live, but, it's also the dead of winter, so I don't think that would work out too well. But anyway, go get yourself an apple. Go home. And dedicate just like 3 to 5 minutes to just sit in a chair and just eat the apple. And just assess your life for a moment. Yeah. Bye, everybody.